They told me my mother left nothing but a condemned house. What I found buried beneath the floorboards rewrote my entire childhood. Have you ever discovered that everything you believed about your past was a lie? If you've felt that ground-shifting moment, you'll understand what happened next. The day I turned 18 was the day the state stopped pretending to care. No cake sat on any table. No candles waited to be blown out. Just a cardboard box on Mer Henderson's desk, the kind that once held reams of copy paper, now holding 2 pairs of jeans, 4 T-shirts, a jacket with a broken zipper, and a paperback science fiction novel I'd read so many times the spine had split. Henderson slid the box across his desk without looking at me. His office smelled like burnt coffee and the kind of industrial air freshener that never quite masks what it's supposed to. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, same as they had for the 12 years I'd lived at Mountain View Group Home. 12 years. That's 4,380 days of scheduled meals, mandatory counseling sessions, and sleeping in rooms that belong to no one because they belong to everyone. I'd learned to fold my clothes into tight squares. I'd learned to eat fast. I'd learned that hope was a luxury item not included in the state's budget. So that's it, Brandon. Henderson leaned back in his chair, which protested with a metallic groan. You're officially a free man. Got your final check, Social Security card, birth certificate, everything you need to start paying taxes. He attempted something like a smile. It died quickly. I didn't smile back. My hands gripped the edges of the box, cardboard, slightly damp from sitting in storage. For 12 years, my life had moved according to schedules printed on laminated sheets. Breakfast at 7, school at 8:15, curfew at 9:30. Even my future had been scheduled mapped out in quarterly goal-setting sessions with counselors who changed every 18 months. Now the schedule ended. The map stopped at the edge of the desk. Freedom should have felt like an open door. Instead, it felt like being shoved off a cliff in the dark. No idea how far down the ground waited. There is one other thing. Henderson fished a white envelope from the wire basket near his elbow. It looked wrong among the beige and gray government forms. Too crisp, too clean. This came for you yesterday, from a law firm. The envelope was heavy stock expensive. My name was typed across the front in a font that looked like it cost money. Brandon Clark. Below that, an address for a firm called Anderson and Associates, Portland, Oregon. I'd never heard of them. What is it? Henderson was already turning his attention to a stack of intake forms for the next kid. No idea. They just said it was important. Pertaining to the estate of Rebecca Martin. The name hit like a fist to the stomach. Rebecca Martin. My mother. A woman I remembered only in fractured pieces that might have been dreams. The smell of flour on her hands. The sound of her humming something I couldn't place anymore. The rough texture of a blue knit scarf. She used to wear the one that had hung on a hook by our apartment door. She had disappeared from my life when I was 6 years old, leaving me in the care of a system that raised children with paperwork and procedure instead of love. The official story, the one repeated in every file with my name on it, was abandonment, pure and simple. A mother who walked away. The story I told myself late at night when the group home was finally quiet was darker. I wasn't worth staying for. Whatever I had been at 6 years old, it hadn't been enough. I spent my first night of freedom in a motel off Interstate 84. The kind where the television was bolted to the dresser and the Bible in the nightstand drawer was missing its first 30 pages. Trucks roared past outside their headlights, sweeping across the thin curtains every few minutes. The bed sagged in the middle. The carpet smelled like cigarettes, even though a no smoking sign hung on the back of the door. I sat on the edge of that bed, the envelope in my hands, turning it over and over. The paper was thick, substantial, the kind of thing important people sent to other important people. An estate. The word conjured images from movies I'd watched in the group home common room, mansions with circular driveways, trust funds, lawyers in wood-paneled offices discussing investments and portfolios. It couldn't possibly have anything to do with my mother. The woman in my fractured memories had worked 2 jobs. I remembered that much. The apartment we'd lived in had been small, the walls thin enough that I could hear the neighbor's television through them. She'd always seemed tired, always in motion, always running from something I was too young to understand. Finally, near midnight, I tore the envelope open. The letter inside was dense with legal language that twisted around itself. Testamentary disposition, intestate succession, fiduciary obligations, words that meant nothing to me, arranged in paragraphs that blurred together under the motel's dim lighting. But the core message was clear enough. I was to report to the office of Ms. Patricia Anderson to discuss the settlement of my mother's assets. Assets. Another word that felt too big, too official for the woman who'd hummed off-key while making breakfast. The next morning, I took a bus downtown. Portland's skyline rose ahead, glass towers catching the morning sun. The city hummed with purpose, everyone moving like they knew exactly where they belonged. I felt small in my worn jeans and faded hoodie, carrying everything I owned in a backpack that had seen better days. The law office occupied 3 floors of a building that seemed to be made entirely of windows and steel. The lobby had marble floors that clicked under my shoes. A security guard at the desk looked me up and down, then pointed toward the elevators without saying anything. The receptionist on the 14th floor wore a suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her expression stayed carefully neutral as I gave my name, but her eyes took in my appearance, cataloging and dismissing in the same glance. She made a phone call. 2 minutes later, a door opened and a woman stepped out. Patricia Anderson was maybe 52, with steel gray hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that looked like they'd read every contract ever written. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry except small silver earrings. When she shook my hand, her grip was firm, her palm dry. "Brandon, thank you for coming." She led me into a corner office with a view that stretched across the Willamette River to the West Hills. The furniture was dark wood, polished until it gleamed. Everything smelled faintly of leather and old paper. "Please sit." She gestured to a chair across from her desk. I sat, setting my backpack on the floor beside me. The chair was leather soft, the kind of furniture that probably cost more than 6 months of state support checks. Anderson settled into her own chair, folding her hands on the desk's surface. "I'll be direct with you, Brandon. Your mother's estate is not substantial. In fact, by most legal metrics, it's a liability." She slid a manila folder across the desk. I opened it. Inside were photographs. A small house wood siding, weathered to gray. Windows covered with sheets of plywood nailed shut. The roof sagged in the middle like something had given up. Paint peeled in long strips curling away from the walls underneath. Weeds grew waist-high around the foundation. Skeletal trees pressed in from all sides. It looked less like a home and more like something people had tried very hard to forget. "Your mother owned this property. Anderson's voice stayed calm, professional. It's located outside a town called Hollow Ridge, Montana. About 400 people live there. The house sits on 2 acres, approximately 6 miles from town, on a rural road. She inherited it from her grandmother. It's been in your family for 4 generations. I stared at the photographs. This was my inheritance. This ruin, this monument to decay and neglect. As I said, it's a liability. Anderson pulled another sheet from the folder. The property has significant code violations. More importantly, there are back taxes owed. 6 years' worth. The total comes to $8,400. $8,400. I had $312 to my name. That was the sum total of my state-provided transition payment, the amount deemed sufficient to launch an 18-year-old into independent adulthood. I'm aware of your financial situation. Something that might have been sympathy flickered across Anderson's face. Which brings me to this. She produced another document, this one with a corporate letterhead. Pinewood Ventures, LLC. The logo was sleek, modern, all clean lines and sans serif font. They've been trying to acquire land in that area for a resort development project. They've made an offer on your mother's property. She turned the paper so I could read it. $28,000. The number seemed enormous, impossible. They know about the tax lien. Anderson's finger tapped the bottom of the page. This offer is conditional on clear title, so the $8,400 would be paid directly to the county. After taxes and my fees, you would walk away with approximately $19,600. $19,600. It was a fortune. It was a security deposit on an apartment, first and last month's rent. It was new clothes that actually fit. It was a bus ticket to anywhere or a used car to get there. It was the answer to every terrified question that had been screaming in my head since I'd walked out of Henderson's office with my life in a cardboard box. It was the logical choice, the only choice. They want the land, not the structure. Anderson's voice stayed neutral, giving me facts without pushing. They plan to demolish the house. The property sits near a creek with good access to Forest Service land. They see potential for a boutique resort, high-end cabins, that sort of thing. Demolish it, tear it down, erase it completely. Part of me felt something like satisfaction at the thought. Let them wipe away this last pathetic piece of her just as she had wiped herself away from me. Let them bulldoze it into the ground and build something clean and new on top of the ashes. I have the paperwork ready. Anderson slid a contract toward me, along with a pen. You can sign now if you'd like. The money would be in your account within 7 business days. I looked at the pen. My hand started to reach for it. This was it, the clean break, the end of a story I'd never wanted to be part of. I could sign the paper, take the money, and never look back. I could finally be free of the ghost of Rebecca Martin, free of the woman who'd chosen everything else over staying. My fingers stopped an inch from the pen. A thought surfaced, quiet and stubborn. It came from somewhere deeper than logic, somewhere that remembered the smell of flour and the sound of humming and the texture of a blue scarf. Before you erase it, you should see it. Before you sell the last trace of her, you owe it to yourself to stand where she stood. I want to see it first. The words surprised me as much as they surprised Anderson. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Brandon, the photographs don't misrepresent the condition. It's not safe. The structure is unsound. The road is difficult. And, honestly, there's nothing there for you but confirmation of what you already know. I know. My voice gained something, a sliver of conviction I didn't know I had. But I need to see it before I sign. I need to stand there. Anderson studied my face for a long moment. Her sharp eyes searched for something. I don't know what she found, but slowly, deliberately, she nodded. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small brass key, tarnished with age, tied to a piece of faded red yarn. Very well. She wrote an address on a yellow sticky note and handed it to me along with the key. The bus to Hollow Ridge leaves from the downtown terminal at 8 in the morning. It runs once a day. This is the only key to the property. Be careful, Brandon. It's a place that's been alone for a long time. Places like that hold on to things. The bus ride was exactly as long and uncomfortable as she'd implied. An old coach, its engine groaning as it pulled out of Portland's urban sprawl. I watched the city shrink in the grimy window skyscrapers giving way to suburbs, then strip malls, then wide, flat farmland that stretched toward distant mountains. The other passengers were quiet, tired. An elderly woman with a mesh bag full of groceries balanced on her lap. A man in a paint-stained work uniform who fell asleep before we even hit the highway. A young mother trying to keep her toddler entertained with a coloring book that was missing half its pages. I felt invisible among them, just another person in transit from one place to another, carrying a past I didn't understand toward a future I couldn't see. My reflection stared back at me from the window, superimposed over the passing landscape. Thin face, pale skin eyes that looked older than 18. For my entire life, I had defined myself by absence. A father I'd never known, a mother who'd left, a home that was never a home. I was a collection of things that weren't there, a person shaped by empty spaces. Now I was heading toward another absence, another empty space, a derelict house that proved one final time that I had never been worth staying for. So why was I doing this? The logical part of my brain screamed to turn around, go back, sign the papers, take the money. $19,600 could change everything. It could be the foundation of a real life, a fresh start. But something deeper kept me pinned to that vibrating seat, something primal and stubborn that needed to see the place where she'd chosen to be instead of being with me. The landscape shifted. Flat farmland gave way to rolling hills, then steeper terrain. Pine forests climbed the hillsides, dense and dark. The sky seemed bigger out here, wider, stretching from horizon to horizon without the interruption of buildings. After nearly 6 hours, the driver called out, "Hollow Ridge." I grabbed my backpack and stepped off the bus into what felt like a different era. The town was barely more than a crossroads. A single stoplight swayed in the breeze, blinking yellow in all 4 directions. On one corner sat a gas station with pumps that looked like they'd been installed sometime in the 1980s. Across from it, a general store with a wooden porch and a faded Coca-Cola sign. A handful of houses scattered nearby, most of them single-story, all of them old. That was it. The entire town. The air smelled like pine needles and earth so clean it almost hurt. It was quiet enough that I could hear a fly buzzing near the gas station's ice machine. I crossed to the general store, my footsteps loud on the wooden porch. A bell jingled as I pushed open the door. Inside, dim and cool shelves stocked with the basics. Canned goods, bread, milk in an old refrigerator case that hummed loudly. An old man sat behind the counter on a stool, reading a newspaper spread out before him. He looked up as I entered, peering at me over reading glasses that sat low on his nose. His face was deeply lined skin, weathered by decades of mountain sun and wind. 70, maybe older. Help you? I pulled out the sticky note with the address. I'm looking for this place. He squinted at my handwriting. Then his expression changed. Something flickered in his eyes, recognition mixed with something else I couldn't name. The old Vance place. He corrected himself immediately. Martin Place, I mean. Haven't had anyone ask about that property in years. You family, her son. The words felt strange in my mouth, foreign. I hadn't called myself anyone's son in 12 years. The old man's gaze sharpened, studying my face with new intensity. He was quiet for a long moment, then something softened in his weathered features. Well, I'll be. You've got her eyes. Same green, same shape. He gave me directions. The house was another 6 miles out of town, down a dirt road that wasn't maintained by the county anymore. He warned me about potholes, washouts, places where the road had been eaten away by erosion. Walk'll take you about 2 hours, maybe a bit less if you're young and quick. He paused, then added, Your ma, she was looking into things before she died. Old county records land, deeds from way back. Came in here one day asking about the courthouse basement where they keep the archives. I told her to talk to the county clerk. He didn't say anything else, but something in his tone suggested there was more he could have said. I thanked him and left the bell jingling again as the door swung shut behind me. The walk was long. The paved road ended after half a mile, turning to gravel that crunched under my shoes. Then the gravel faded into a rutted dirt track, 2 tire grooves separated by a strip of weeds and grass growing tall down the middle. Trees pressed in from both sides, their branches reaching overhead, creating a tunnel of green shadow. The silence was absolute, except for my footsteps and the occasional cry of a crow somewhere in the canopy. It felt like walking off the edge of the world into a place that had been forgotten on purpose. Then I saw it. The house sat back from the road, maybe 50 yards, half swallowed by encroaching forest. The photographs hadn't captured the profound loneliness that clung to the place like fog. The wood of the walls had silvered with age and weather, the porch tilted at a drunken angle, its support posts rotting at the base. The plywood over the windows looked like blindfolds. It was exactly what Patricia Anderson had said. A ruin, nothing. But standing there, looking at it, I felt something twist in my chest. This was where she'd chosen to be. This isolated, decaying place. While I'd moved through group homes and foster families, sleeping in beds that belonged to no one, she'd been here. Alone. I walked up the porch steps, testing each one before putting my full weight down. The wood groaned, but held. The brass key slid into the front door's lock, but wouldn't turn. The wood had swollen with moisture, sealing the door shut. I pushed against it, throwing my shoulder into it, but it didn't budge. The house didn't want to be entered. Frustrated, I circled the building, pushing through thorny bushes and weeds that grabbed at my jeans. On the side, I found a window with plywood that looked slightly looser than the others, gaps visible between the board and the frame. I wedged my fingers into the gap and pulled. The wood was soft with rot, giving slightly under pressure. I braced my foot against the wall and heaved with everything I had. With a long, groaning screech of rusty nails, the board ripped free. I peered into the darkness inside. Air wafted out thick and musty, carrying the smell of dust and trapped time and things forgotten. I hoisted myself up and through the opening, dropping onto the floor inside, with a thud that sent dust motes dancing in the shaft of light from the uncovered window. I was in a small kitchen. Dust covered everything in a gray shroud. A formica table, its surface dulled. A sink with rust stains. An ancient stove, the kind with 4 gas burners, and an oven below. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling corners like abandoned decorations. I moved slowly, my footsteps muffled. Each room was a portrait of solitude. A living room with a single armchair, its fabric-torn stuffing spilling out. A bathroom with a rust-stained tub and a mirror so spotted with age I could barely see my reflection. And, finally, a bedroom, the smallest room. A simple iron bed frame against one wall, stripped of its mattress. A small wooden dresser in the corner, its drawers slightly open. The air here felt different, heavier. This was her room. This was where she'd slept, where she'd woken each morning, where she'd spent her nights. I ran my hand along the dresser's dusty surface. It felt like touching a gravestone. I was about to leave to walk back to town and catch whatever bus came next when my foot caught on something. I looked down. One of the floorboards near the bed was raised slightly a fraction of an inch higher than the others. It wasn't a trick of the light or shadow. It was deliberate. My heart started beating faster. I knelt down, my knees cracking in the silence. I dug my fingernails into the crack and lifted. The board came up easily, no sound. It had been cut intentionally, designed to be removed. Beneath it, nestled in the dark, dusty space between the floor joists, was a metal box. An old ammunition case, olive drab heavy latch on the front. Not large, maybe 12 inches by 8, but solid. I lifted it out. It was cold to the touch, heavier than it looked. I sat on the dusty floor, the single beam of light from the window illuminating the box in my lap. My hand shook as I worked the latch. It was stiff with rust fighting me, but finally it sprang open with a loud click that echoed through the empty house. I lifted the lid. Inside, no money, no jewelry, nothing of obvious value. Instead, letters, stacks and stacks of them, written on thin, yellowing paper, tied together in neat bundles with faded twine. Maybe 50 bundles, maybe more. On top of the first bundle was a single envelope untied waiting. Written on the front in elegant looping handwriting were 2 words for Brandon. My breath caught. I picked up the envelope with trembling fingers and opened it, unfolding the single sheet of paper inside. The same handwriting covered the page, neat and careful. "My dearest Brandon," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and it means you are finally home." The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears I didn't know I had. "I know you must have so many questions. I know you must hate me. I need you to know that not a day has gone by, not a single hour, that I have not thought of you. Not a night has passed that I haven't dreamed of your face. Leaving you was not abandonment. It was a sacrifice, the hardest and most necessary thing I have ever done. I had to stop reading. My vision was swimming. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, angry at the tears, angry at myself, angry at everything. But I forced myself to continue. "Your father was a good man, Brandon, but he made a terrible mistake. He borrowed money from a dangerous person to start a business. a man named Donald King. When the business failed, your father couldn't pay him back. King doesn't run a bank, my love. He runs on fear. After your father died in that accident, the debt became mine. King and his people came to our apartment. They made threats, not just to me. They talked about you. They described your school, your walk home, the playground where you played. They knew everything. The floor felt cold beneath me. The dusty air seemed hard to breathe. I went to the police, but they couldn't do anything. King was careful. No paper trail, no evidence, just his reputation. I knew I couldn't protect you if we stayed together. He would have used you to control me, to hurt me, so I did the only thing I could think of. I ran, I disappeared, and I made you disappear too. I put you into the system knowing they would move you, change your name temporarily, keep you safe in a way I no longer could. I told myself it was like witness protection. It was the only way to break the trail, to make sure King's people could never find you. I came here to your great-grandmother's cottage, this forgotten place. I boarded it up, lived like a ghost. I worked odd jobs in the next town, saved every penny. I spent every waking moment thinking of you, writing to you, even though I knew I could never send the letters. This box, Brandon, this box is my life. It's the story of the years we lost. I need you to read them. I need you to understand. This house isn't a ruin, it's a fortress. It was my sanctuary. And I pray that one day it can be yours. Don't let them take it. It's all I have to give you. It's everything, all my love forever. Mom, I let the letter fall from my fingers. A sound escaped my chest, raw and ragged, half sob, half scream. The story of my life, the one I had built, brick by brick, around the central pillar of my mother's rejection, had just collapsed. She hadn't left me. She had hidden me. She hadn't abandoned me. She had saved me. The grief was a wave crashing over me, pulling me under. I cried for the 6-year-old boy who'd been left in a social worker's office, convinced he was unlovable. I cried for the teenager who'd built walls around his heart to protect it from shattering again. And I cried for the woman who had lived out her days in this dusty, lonely house, writing letters to a son she couldn't see all to keep him safe. The weight of her love, a love I had never known existed, was crushing and liberating all at once. I sat there on the floor for hours as the light from the window slowly faded, the room sinking into shadow. The silence of the house was no longer oppressive. It was reverent, sacred even. This was a place that had held a secret, guarded it fiercely, waiting. My phone buzzed in my pocket, jarring in the stillness. A text from Patricia Anderson lit up the screen. Brandon just checking in. Have you had a chance to reconsider the offer? Pinewood is getting impatient. I looked at the glowing words, then at the letter still lying on the dusty floor beside me. $19,600. The offer felt obscene, now an insult. They wanted to bulldoze this place, this fortress built of a mother's love, and replace it with luxury cabins and a spa. They wanted to erase her sacrifice for profit, but the fear was still there, real and sharp. I was 18 with no job, no prospects, $300 to my name. What was I supposed to do? Live here, fight a man like Donald King? It was insane. This is the point where a story can break you. When the truth you've uncovered is so big, so world-altering, that you don't know how to carry it. Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment where everything you thought you knew about your life, about your family, turned out to be wrong. It feels like the ground beneath your feet has vanished. If you're nodding right now, if this is hitting you in a real way, I want you to know you're not alone. The people who hear these stories we understand. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to rewrite your own history. Because in that moment, sitting in the dark with my mother's words still echoing in my head, I knew I had a choice to make. I could take the easy money and run, or I could stay and honor the truth. My choice came in the form of the other letters. I used my phone's flashlight to read them bundle by bundle. The batteries drained slowly as I worked through years condensed into paper and ink. The earliest letters were the hardest. Written in those first weeks after she'd left me, the handwriting shaky words crossed out and rewritten. She'd documented everything with the precision of someone building a case. March 15th, 2012. Brandon started first grade today. I called the school pretending to be a survey company, asked about enrollment. They confirmed a Brandon Clark in Mrs. Peterson's class. I know they changed your last name temporarily for safety. Smart. King won't find you under Clark. I cried for an hour after hanging up. April 2nd, 2012 saw Donald King today in Burns, 2 towns over. I was buying groceries, paid cash, kept my head down. He was meeting someone at the diner across the street. A man in an expensive suit. They shook hands, got into separate cars. King drives a black Cadillac now. New money from other people's misery. May 18th, 2012. Your father's business partner, James Rodriguez, left Montana last month. His wife told me at the post office before they moved. She said King threatened their daughter. They sold their house for half its value to one of King's companies, Pinewood Ventures. I wrote the name down. It's the 3rd company I've connected to him. The letters weren't just expressions of love. They were a chronicle of war, a record of someone fighting back from the shadows. I read about her days, how she worked at a laundromat in the next town, washing other people's clothes for minimum wage paid in cash, so there was no paper trail. How she spent her evenings at the county courthouse basement, going through old records, copying land deeds by hand because photocopying required ID. How she learned to be invisible to move through the world like smoke. In a letter dated 2 years after she'd left me, the handwriting steadier. Now more determined, she wrote about a shift in strategy, Brandon. I've started to follow him. Not literally, that would be too dangerous, but I've been tracking him through public records, old newspapers, courthouse filings. King isn't just a loan shark. He's built an empire. He uses his threats to force people to sell their homes and businesses to shell companies he controls. Companies like Pinewood Ventures, Summit Holdings, Mountain Ridge Development. He's a vulture, and this whole region is his hunting ground. My blood went cold as I read the name. Pinewood Ventures, the company that wanted to buy this land. The company offering me $19,600. It wasn't a coincidence. They weren't just developers stumbling onto an available property. They were him. Still hunting even after she was gone, still trying to take the one thing she'd managed to hold on to. Another letter, written just over a year before her death, gave me the final piece. My love, I think I found something, a weakness. Your great-grandfather was a clever man. He built this house with his own hands back in 1952, and he built secrets into it. There's a loose stone in the fireplace hearth behind where the old wood stove used to sit. I'm putting everything there, all the evidence I've collected. It's not much, but it might be enough. And there's something else there, too. A little seed money for the taxes for a start for our home. If you're reading this, it's yours to decide what to do with it. I scrambled to my feet, nearly tripping over the metal box. The living room was darker now. Sunset painting the walls with orange light filtered through the gaps in the boarded windows. An old pot-bellied wood stove stood in front of a large stone fireplace. I knelt down, running my hands over the rough hearthstones. They were cold, slightly damp. My heart hammered against my ribs. One of them, on the left side, near where the stove's pipe would have connected, shifted slightly under my touch. I pried at it with my fingers. It was heavy resistant, but it lifted out slowly, revealing a dark, hollowed space beneath. Inside was another box, this one made of wood, plain pine, gone gray with age. I pulled it out and opened it. The contents were exactly as she'd described. A small black ledger book, its cover cracked with age. I opened it carefully. Inside, in my mother's neat handwriting, were names and dates and numbers. 17 entries, each one a person, an address, an amount of money, and a date marked forced sale. Robert Walker, 240 acres, Hollow Ridge. $95,000 loan became $280,000 with interest. Forced sale, March 14, 2019. Property now owned by Summit Holdings, LLC. Walker lost family ranch, 3 generations. Jennifer Hayes, small engine repair shop, Burns. $35,000 loan became $98,000. Forced sale, August 22, 2017. Business closed. Hayes declared bankruptcy. Shop now owned by Mountain Ridge Development. Thomas and Mary Brennan, 180 acres, farmland, eastern Montana. $80,000 loan threatened, daughter age 12. Forced sale, November 3, 2020. Now Pinewood Ventures property. 17 stories. 17 families destroyed. There were also photographs, maybe 24 of them. Donald King meeting with the men in suits. King shaking hands with someone in front of the county courthouse. King at what looked like a charity fundraiser, smiling for the camera. A woman in an evening gown on his arm. And beneath the photos, 6 cassette tapes, the old-fashioned kind that barely anyone used anymore. Each one labeled with a date in my mother's handwriting. At the very bottom of the box, a thick brown envelope sealed with red wax. I broke the seal. Inside was cash. Stacks of $20 and $50 bills held together with rubber bands that had gone brittle with age. I didn't count it immediately, but I knew with absolute certainty it would be enough. Enough for the taxes. Enough for a start. Tucked into the stack was a final small note, folded once. Be brave, my bear cub. Your love is my legacy. The decision crystallized in that moment, solid and unshakable. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to sell. This land, this house, wasn't just my inheritance. It was hers, her story, her fight. And now it was mine to finish. I took out my phone. My hands were steady now, no tremor. First I called Patricia Anderson. It was late, nearly 8 in the evening, but she answered on the second ring. Brandon, is everything all right? Everything is different. My voice sounded strange to me, deeper somehow, more solid. I'm not selling. I'm paying the back taxes. I'll wire the money to the county tax office tomorrow. Silence stretched across the line. Then carefully, Brandon, are you certain about this? What changed your mind? I found some things my mother left for me. This is the right thing to do. Can you handle the legal side? Tell Pinewood the deal is off. I could almost hear her thinking, reassessing. All right, Brandon, I'll take care of it, but be careful. These people don't like being told no. I know. Thank you. I hung up and immediately searched for Pinewood Ventures' contact information. The number was on the letterhead Anderson had shown me. A professional voicemail answered after 3 rings. Pinewood Ventures, Kenneth Moore speaking. My name is Brandon Clark. Regarding the property at 214 Stone Creek Road, Hollow Ridge, I'm rejecting your offer. The slickness in his voice vanished, replaced by something harder, colder. I think you're making a serious mistake, kid. That property is a teardown. It's worthless. Our offer is more than generous. It's not for sale. A pause. Then his voice dropped lower, each word deliberate. Listen to me carefully. That land has a complicated history. It's more trouble than it's worth. You should take the money and walk away. Start fresh somewhere else. It wasn't advice. It was a threat, wrapped in polite language. Thanks for the tip. I hung up. The first act of defiance sent adrenaline surging through me, a mix of terror and exhilaration. I was no longer passive, no longer a victim of circumstances I couldn't control. I was choosing, acting, but I was also alone in a house miles from town with no car, no real plan, and I'd just antagonized people my mother had spent 12 years hiding from. I needed help. I scrolled through my phone's contacts. There weren't many. A few kids from the group home, most of whom I'd lost touch with. Henderson's office number, which I'd never call again. And one name that made me pause. Ryan Thompson. We'd been in the same group home for 4 years, ages 12 to 16. He'd been transferred to a different facility after that, but we'd kept in touch sporadically. Last I'd heard, he was living in Bend, Oregon, working as an electrician's apprentice. I called. It rang 5 times. I was about to hang up when he answered, voice rough, like I'd woken him. Yeah, Ryan, it's Brandon. A pause. Then his voice sharpened with recognition. Brandon, holy shit, man. You okay? I need help. Without hesitation. Where are you? I told him. About the house, about my mother, about the threat I'd just made to people who apparently made their living through intimidation. He didn't ask questions, didn't need details. That was Ryan, loyal to the bone, especially to people from the system. We'd learned early that we only had each other. I'm 2 hours away. I'll leave now. Text me the exact address. And Brandon, lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone until I get there. But sleep was impossible. I sat in the living room as darkness filled the house completely. My phone's flashlight the only source of illumination. I read more letters, hungry now for every detail of her life, every scrap of the woman I'd lost. She wrote about loneliness, the weight of it, how it pressed down some nights until she couldn't breathe. She wrote about guilt, wondering if she'd made the right choice, if there had been another way. But she always came back to the same conclusion: you were safe, and that was all that mattered. If you're watching this and you've ever felt abandoned, left behind by someone who should have stayed, hold that feeling. Because what I didn't know, what took me 12 years to discover, was that every single day she spent in this lonely house, she was fighting a war I never saw. A war where the bullets were made of silence and sacrifice, where the victories were measured in my survival, not her happiness. In a letter from my 10th birthday, she wrote about seeing my school photo that a sympathetic social worker had sent her, how she'd memorized every detail of my face, looking for traces of the boy she'd known, how she'd baked a cake even though there was no one to share it with, lighting a single candle and singing happy birthday to an empty room. The grief came in waves, not the sharp cutting pain from earlier, but something deeper, more permanent, an ache that would never fully heal because there was no way to go back. No way to tell her I understood. No way to say I forgave her because there was nothing to forgive. Around 11, headlights swept across the boarded windows. I tensed, hand moving to my phone, ready to dial 911. But then I heard Ryan's voice calling from outside. "Brandon, it's me, man. Open up." I pulled the front door open, putting my weight into it, and Ryan was there. Taller than I remembered, broader in the shoulders, wearing a flannel jacket and work boots. His dark blonde hair was longer, pulled back in a short ponytail, but his eyes were the same sharp and assessing, taking in everything. He had a duffel bag over one shoulder and a backpack. He stepped inside, looked around at the dust and shadows, and just nodded. "All right, show me what we're dealing with." I showed him everything: the letters, the ledger, the photographs, the cash. I told him about Donald King, about my mother's death, about Pinewood Ventures, and the phone call I'd just made. Ryan listened without interrupting, his expression growing grimmer. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You just declared war on a guy who makes people disappear. You know that, right?" "I know." "Good." He set his duffel bag down. "Then we need a plan. First things first, we're not staying here tonight. This place is a target. We'll drive back to town, find somewhere public to stay. Tomorrow morning, we go to the sheriff. There's a sheriff here. Every county has one. Whether they're worth a damn is another question. But your mom mentioned trying to contact law enforcement. Right. Maybe she found someone who gave a shit." We drove back to Hollow Ridge in Ryan's truck, an old Ford Ranger that rattled but ran. The motel was a 6-room strip along the highway, the kind with doors that opened directly to the parking lot. $35 a night, cash only. We shared a room with 2 beds that sagged in the middle. Ryan fell asleep within minutes, the sleep of someone who'd learned to rest when they could. I lay awake, staring at the water-stained ceiling, thinking about my mother, in that house alone, night after night, listening to the same silence. Morning came cold and clear. We bought coffee and gas station breakfast sandwiches, then found the sheriff's office on Hollow Ridge's main street. It was a small building, brick, with 2 patrol cars parked outside. Inside the office was cramped, but clean. 2 desks, a filing cabinet, a wall map of the county marked with colored pins. The smell of coffee and paper. A woman sat at one of the desks, maybe 48, with short brown hair going gray at the temples and a face that had seen too much to be easily surprised. She wore a tan uniform, sheriff's badge on her chest, a radio on her belt. She looked up as we entered, her eyes moving from me to Ryan and back. "Help you." "My name is Brandon Clark. I inherited the Martin property on Stone Creek Road. I need to talk to someone about Donald King." Her expression changed instantly, sharpening. She stood up taller than I'd expected, maybe 5'10". "Carol Miller." She gestured to two chairs across from her desk. "Sit down, both of you." We sat. She studied me for a long moment before speaking. "I've been waiting for you, Brandon. Your mother called me 3 days before she died. Said she had everything I needed to take down King. We set a meeting for the following Monday. She never showed. The words hit like a punch. 3 days. She'd been 3 days away from finishing it. What happened? Single vehicle accident. Late Saturday night on Route 47, about 10 miles east of here. Her car went off the road down a ravine. Brake failure, according to the report. Miller's tone made it clear what she thought of that report. "You think someone cut her brakes? Not a question." Miller nodded slowly. "I think a lot of things, but thinking isn't the same as proving. Your mother lived alone, kept to herself, didn't trust many people. No witnesses, no evidence of tampering beyond reasonable doubt. The county coroner signed off on accidental death, and the case was closed." "Who's the county coroner?" "A man named Harold Voss. He plays golf with Donald King every Thursday." Miller let that sink in. "I've been building a case against King for 3 years. Extortion, racketeering, fraud. But he's careful. Uses shell companies, pays people off, intimidates witnesses. Your mother was the first person brave enough to document everything. I pulled out the ledger and the photographs. She left these for me. And cassette tapes, recordings." Miller's eyes widened as she flipped through the ledger, her jaw tightening with each page. "Sweet Jesus, this is what I've needed. Names, dates, amounts. If even half these people will testify—" "They won't." Ryan spoke for the first time. "They're scared. King threatened them. Once he can threaten them again." Miller looked at him, reassessing. "You're right. Which is why we need federal involvement. FBI. They have resources, witness protection, the authority to take down an operation like this." She pulled out her phone, scrolled through contacts. "I know an agent in Boise, white-collar crime division. She's been interested in King for a while. How long will that take?" Miller met my eyes. "A few days to get her here, review the evidence, open an official investigation. A few weeks to build the case, months for indictments, trial, conviction. King won't be behind bars tomorrow, Brandon. This is a long fight. My mother fought for 12 years. I can wait a few months." Miller nodded, something like respect crossing her face. "In the meantime, you need to be careful. King knows you rejected the offer by now. He'll push back. Already has." I told her about the phone call, Kenneth Moore's thinly veiled threat. "Yeah, that tracks. Moore is King's public face. Does the negotiations, handles the paperwork. But the muscle comes from other sources." Miller wrote something on a notepad, then handed it to me. "That's my cell. You see anyone suspicious, hear anything strange, call immediately. And don't stay at that house alone." Ryan and I drove back to the property later that morning. In daylight, it looked different, less haunted, more weathered. A place that had survived, not succumbed. We spent the day making it defensible. Ryan checked the window, reinforcing the ones I'd opened, securing the plywood back in place. We cleared the brush around the perimeter so no one could approach unseen. He showed me how to use the tire iron from his truck as a weapon if needed. Around 2 in the afternoon, a truck pulled up the road. An old Dodge paint faded to primer gray. An old man climbed out, moving stiffly. George Harris, the man from the general store. He walked up carrying a cardboard box. Tools rattled inside. He set it down on the porch and looked at me with those weathered eyes. "Your ma helped my granddaughter once. Girl got into debt with some bad people 6 years back. Loan sharks operating out of Boise. Rebecca gave her evidence to report them. Showed her how to file complaints with the state banking commission. Those bastards got shut down. My granddaughter got her life back." He nodded toward the box. "Figure I owe your ma. And since she's gone, I owe you." Inside the box were hammers, saws, a level screwdrivers, all well used, but maintained. Woodworking tools. George spent the next 3 hours teaching me how to fix the sagging porch steps, how to sister a joist to reinforce the damaged support beams. His hands were gnarled with arthritis, but still knew exactly what to do. He talked while he worked, filling the silence with stories about Hollow Ridge, about people I'd never meet, about the rhythm of life in a place where everyone knew everyone. As the sun started to drop, another visitor arrived, a woman, maybe 55, driving a Honda sedan that had seen better days. She parked and got out carrying a wicker basket covered with a checkered cloth. Laura Wilson. She lived 2 miles down the road, George explained. The woman approached her expression soft but reserved. She had gray blonde hair and kind eyes. "I heard Rebecca's son was here." She held out the basket. "Brought you some things from my garden. Tomatoes, zucchini, fresh bread I made this morning." "Thank you." I took the basket, surprised by its weight. "Your mother was kind to me when my husband died 3 years ago. She didn't say much, but she listened. That mattered." Laura hesitated, then added, "This town has a lot of good people, Brandon, but it also has people who'd rather look away when bad things happen. Don't mistake silence for not caring. Sometimes people are just scared." She left without waiting for a response. George packed up his tools as the light faded. Before he drove off, he turned to me. "You need anything, you come to the store. I'm there every day except Sunday." That night, Ryan and I sat on the reinforced porch eating sandwiches made from Laura's bread and tomatoes. The forest around us filled with the sounds of evening. Crickets, an owl somewhere in the distance, the rustle of wind through pine branches. This place could be something. Ryan gestured at the house. "It's got good bones. Needs work, but the foundation's solid. The framing is sound. Your great-grandfather knew what he was doing. You think I should stay. I think you already decided." He looked at me. "You're not the same kid who left the group home 2 days ago. You found something here. Purpose, maybe, or just answers. Either way, you're not walking away." He was right. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Around midnight, headlights appeared on the road, not coming toward the house, just sitting there, maybe a quarter-mile away, watching. Ryan saw them too. He stood up slowly, hand moving to his phone. Could be nothing. Could be. We watched. The headlights stayed motionless for 5 minutes. Then they went dark. Engine still running, we could hear it in the stillness. Then the sound of gravel crunching as the vehicle turned around and drove away. That wasn't nothing. Ryan pulled out his phone, took a photo of where the vehicle had been, even though it was too dark to capture anything useful. "I'm calling Miller." She answered, immediately alert. "What happened?" We told her. She was quiet for a moment. I'll drive by a few times tonight, but, Brandon, you need to understand something. King has connections, deputies who owe him money, judges he's got dirt on. I'm one person. I can't protect you 24/7. I understand. After she hung up, Ryan and I took turns on watch. He slept first while I sat by the window, phone in hand, watching the road. Nothing moved. The forest was silent in that particular way that meant something was wrong, that the usual night animals had gone quiet. When Ryan woke at 3 to take his shift, he found me still awake. "You should sleep." "I can't." We sat together in the darkness, two kids from the system who'd learned early that safety was temporary and trust was earned, not given. At 4:30 in the morning, they came back. This time, no headlights, just the sound of an engine cutting off maybe 300 yards down the road. Then, footsteps, careful and deliberate. Ryan grabbed his phone, dialing 911 while I moved to the window, peering through a gap in the plywood. Two figures dressed in dark clothes, moving toward the house. The 911 operator answered. "Hollow Ridge Emergency Services. This is Brandon Clark at 214 Stone Creek Road. Two people are approaching my house. I think they're armed. Units are en route. Stay inside, lock all doors." The figures stopped at the edge of the clearing. One of them bent down, did something I couldn't see. Then they both retreated quickly, moving back toward wherever they'd parked. Ryan and I waited, hearts pounding. Sirens approached in the distance. Then I smelled it. Gasoline. They'd poured it near the porch. Not enough to start a fire immediately, but enough to send a message. Enough to show they could have burned us out if they'd wanted to. Sheriff Miller arrived first, followed by two patrol cars. She examined the gasoline stain with a flashlight, her expression hard. "They're escalating." She turned to me. "This is intimidation. Next time, it might be actual violence. You need to think very carefully about whether you want to stay here." I found a piece of paper under the windshield wiper of Ryan's truck. A note printed on plain white paper. "Last warning, sell or lose everything." Miller photographed it, bagged it as evidence, even though we all knew it wouldn't lead anywhere. As dawn broke, painting the sky gray and pink, I stood in the yard looking at the house. My mother's fortress. The place she'd chosen over seeing me grow up, because she believed keeping me alive mattered more than keeping me close. If love isn't always visible, sometimes the deepest love is the quietest fight. I turned to Miller. "When can we meet with the FBI? I'll make the call this morning." She looked at me, then at the house, then back. "Your mother would be proud of you, Brandon. Or she'd be furious you're taking this risk. Probably both." She was right. My mother had spent 12 years hiding, surviving in silence, and I was about to do the opposite. I was going to make noise. I was going to bring everything into the light. Ryan stayed close as Miller and her deputies finished their investigation. When they left, he turned to me. "I'm not going back to Bend, not until this is done. I've got vacation days saved up. We're in this together. You don't have to." "Yeah, I do, because that's what family does. And we're family, man. Have been since we were 12 years old, and Henderson put us in the same room. That word, family. It hit differently now, meant something I was only beginning to understand. We spent the rest of the morning going through my mother's evidence more carefully. The cassette tapes revealed conversations she'd recorded over her landline. Donald King's voice, smooth and menacing at the same time, threatening people who couldn't pay. Kenneth Moore negotiating forced sales, his professionalism a thin veneer over coercion. Each tape was damning, each one a piece of the puzzle my mother had assembled while the world forgot she existed. By noon, Miller called back. "The FBI agent can meet tomorrow. Boise field office, 10 in the morning. Can you make it?" "We'll be there. Bring everything." Ledger photos, tapes, any documentation. And, Brandon, she paused, "be ready to tell your mother's story. They'll need to understand why she went into hiding, why she spent 12 years collecting this evidence. It's part of the case. I'll be ready." That night, Ryan and I loaded everything into his truck. The metal box with the letters, the wooden box with the evidence copies of everything stored on my phone as backup. We'd leave at dawn, drive the 4 hours to Boise, and hand over 12 years of my mother's life to strangers in suits who would decide if her sacrifice had been enough. Before we left the house, I went back into the bedroom one last time. The floorboard was still open, the space beneath empty now, except for dust. I knelt down and placed my hand on the floor where the metal box had rested for who knows how many years. "I'm finishing it, Mom. I promise." The words were for her, for me, for the ghosts that filled this house. A promise I intended to keep, no matter what it cost. We left Hollow Ridge before sunrise, Ryan driving while I sat in the passenger seat with my mother's metal box on my lap. The highway stretched ahead empty at this hour, cutting through high desert landscape that looked alien in the pre-dawn gray. Burns appeared after 90 minutes, a town slightly larger than Hollow Ridge, but with the same weathered quality. Buildings from the 1950s sat next to newer strip malls, everything coated in dust from the arid climate. First Montana Bank was a squat brick building on the main street, its sign barely visible in the early light. We waited in the parking lot until the bank opened at 9. A young teller, maybe 25, unlocked the door and looked surprised to see customers already waiting. "I need to access a safety deposit box." I showed her the key. My mother had left the small brass one tied with string. The teller examined it, then led us to the vault in the back. The safety deposit boxes lined the walls, small metal doors with combination locks. Box 447 was near the floor, requiring me to kneel to insert the key. "I'll need the password. Bear Cub." She typed it into her computer, nodded, then left us alone. Ryan stood guard at the vault entrance while I turned the key. The box slid out heavier than expected. Inside, wrapped in plastic bags to protect against moisture, was everything my mother had promised. A USB drive in a waterproof case, files she'd written on a label, bank records, emails, scanned contracts, a handwritten list on notebook paper, names and addresses. Potential witnesses, the header read. 3 people willing to testify if protected. Photocopies of land deeds highlighted in yellow, where signatures had been forged or dates altered. 11 properties, each one stolen through manipulation of legal documents. And, at the bottom, a mini DVD in a hard plastic case. On the label in my mother's handwriting, my testimony. "Show this to someone who will listen." Ryan looked over my shoulder at the contents. She documented everything. "This is prosecutor-level evidence. She was smarter than all of them, and they still killed her for it." We didn't say anything else, just loaded everything into Ryan's backpack, signed the release forms, and walked back into the morning sun. The drive to Boise took another 3 hours, Interstate 84, climbing through mountain passes before descending into the Treasure Valley. The city sprawled across the valley floor, bigger than I'd expected, with actual skyscrapers downtown. The FBI field office was in a modern building near the airport, all glass and concrete. Security was tight. We went through metal detectors, surrendered our phones, temporarily got visitor badges clipped to our shirts. Agent Linda Wright met us in a conference room on the third floor. She was maybe 42, with dark blonde hair, cut short and practical, wearing a navy blazer over a white shirt. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Brandon Clark, Ryan Thompson." She gestured to chairs around a conference table. "Sheriff Miller gave me a preliminary briefing. You have evidence related to Donald King's criminal enterprise." I set the metal box on the table, then added the contents from the safety deposit box. Ryan placed the backpack beside them. "My mother spent 12 years collecting this. She died before she could give it to anyone who'd listen." Wright pulled latex gloves from her pocket, snapped them on, and began examining the ledger. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. She was reading it like someone fluent in criminal behavior, seeing patterns instantly. She moved to the photographs, studying each one. Then the USB drive, which she inserted into a laptop, she pulled from her briefcase. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, opening files, scrolling through documents. Minutes passed. Ryan and I sat in silence, watching her work. Finally, she looked up. "This is comprehensive. Your mother was meticulous. The documentation here connects King to 17 instances of loan sharking, extortion, and fraudulent property acquisition spanning 15 years. Is it enough?" Wright leaned back in her chair. "Alone. Maybe. King has good lawyers, and white-collar crime is hard to prosecute. Juries get confused by financial records. Defense attorneys muddy the water." She paused, her eyes meeting mine. "But this isn't alone. We've been investigating King for 18 months. We have 2 other witnesses, both former employees, who kept records. With your mother's evidence, we can build a RICO case. RICO, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. It's designed to take down organized crime by proving a pattern of illegal activity. King isn't just a loan shark. He's running a criminal enterprise using multiple shell companies to launder stolen assets." Wright tapped the ledger. "Your mother identified the pattern. Now we can prove it. How long to build the case?" 3 to 4 months. To get indictments, another month. Trial could be 6 months to a year out. But Brandon, you need to understand something. King will know you're involved. He'll know where this evidence came from. Are you prepared for that? He already knows. I told her about the rejected offer, the phone call from Kenneth Moore, the attempted intimidation with gasoline. He's already escalating. Wright's jaw tightened. "Then we need to move fast. I'll open an official investigation today. We'll subpoena King's financial records, interview the witnesses on this list, start building discovery. In the meantime, you stay visible. Don't hide. Hiding makes you look guilty and makes you an easier target." Visible how? Go back to Hollow Ridge. Live your life. Fix up that house. Get a job. Become part of the community. The more public you are, the harder it is for King to move against you without drawing attention. And Brandon. She pulled a card from her jacket pocket, handed it to me. "My direct line. You see anything suspicious, you call immediately. Not 911. Me." We left the FBI office as afternoon sun beat down on the parking lot. Ryan drove us to a diner on the edge of town, a place with vinyl booths and a laminated menu offering breakfast all day. Over eggs and coffee, he asked the question I'd been avoiding. What are you going to do? Really going to stay in Hollow Ridge? I don't have anywhere else to go. That's not an answer. I looked out the window at the traffic passing, people going about their lives oblivious to the fact that mine had been rewritten in the span of 3 days. Yeah, I'm staying. That house is mine. My mother's really, but she left it to me, and I'm not letting King take it. Ryan nodded slowly. Then we make it livable. I've got skills. Electrical, basic plumbing, some carpentry. George Harris seems willing to help. We can do this. The word we settled something in my chest. I wasn't alone in this. We drove back to Hollow Ridge as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. By the time we pulled up to the house, stars were emerging in a sky darker and clearer than anything I'd seen in Portland. Sheriff Miller was waiting on the porch, her patrol car parked in the clearing. She stood as we approached. FBI opening the investigation this morning. Agent Wright is pulling together a task force. Good. Miller handed me a folder. I did some digging of my own. Pulled the accident report on your mother's death. The mechanic who examined her car is a guy named Tom Reeves, runs a shop in Burns. He noted in his report that the brake line had a clean cut, not consistent with wear and tear. But his supervisor overruled him, said it was inconclusive. Who was his supervisor? Deputy Coroner reports to Harold Voss, the same Voss who plays golf with King. Miller's expression was grim. Reeves is still alive, still runs that shop. He might be willing to talk now that there's federal involvement. I added it to the mental list of threads to pull. Everything connected back to King, a web with him at the center. Over the next 2 weeks, Ryan and I fell into a rhythm. We'd wake at dawn, work on the house until the light failed, then collapse into exhausted sleep. George Harris showed up most mornings with tools and knowledge, teaching me how to replace rotted boards, how to measure twice and cut once, how to read a level. The work was physical and satisfying in a way nothing in my life had ever been. Each repair felt like reclaiming something, pushing back against decay and neglect. We replaced the porch, entirely tearing out the old supports and building new ones from treated lumber George sold us at cost. We patched the roof where it sagged, reinforcing the trusses from inside. We cleared the overgrown brush, revealing a yard that had once been maintained, even loved. Laura Wilson brought food every few days. Casseroles, fresh bread, vegetables from her garden. She never stayed long, but her presence was steady, a quiet assertion that we belonged here. Other neighbors appeared as word spread. A couple named Frank and Mary Davis, who lived 3 miles east, brought paint and brushes, helped us coat the exterior in a fresh coat of white that made the house look almost new. A retired teacher named Helen Wright, no relation to the FBI agent, donated curtains and helped me clean years of grime from the windows once we removed the plywood. The community was stitching me into itself one small gesture at a time. 3 weeks after our meeting with the FBI, a truck I didn't recognize pulled up the road. An old Chevy rusted along the wheel wells. A man climbed out slowly, moving like someone whose body had betrayed him. He was maybe 67, weathered face, wearing work pants and a flannel shirt. He walked up to where Ryan and I were replacing a section of porch railing, stood there for a moment, looking at the house, then at me. "You, Brandon Clark." "Yes, sir." "Robert Walker." His voice was rough like gravel. "Your mother's name was in a ledger. She documented what King did to me. The name clicked. Robert Walker, the farmer who'd lost his ranch. 240 acres, 3 generations. I'm sorry for what happened to you. Walker shook his head. Don't be sorry. Be ready, because I'm ready now. He pulled a manila envelope from inside his jacket. 12 years ago, King forced me to sign over my ranch. I was too scared to fight back. He threatened my daughter, said she'd disappear if I went to the police. So I signed, but I kept copies, everything. The original loan agreement, the revised terms that tripled my debt overnight, the transfer documents with my signature dated the day after he threatened my family. Why now? Because your mother died trying to finish what she started, and I'm done being a coward. Walker's eyes were hard, determined. Agent Wright called me yesterday, said the FBI is building a case, said they need witnesses willing to testify. I'm in, all the way. I took the envelope, felt its weight. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This won't be easy. King has lawyers' money connections, but he doesn't have the truth, and that's what your mother gave us, the truth documented and undeniable. Walker stayed for an hour sharing stories about his ranch, about the life King had stolen. His daughter was 24 now, living in Seattle, still afraid to come back to Montana. His wife had left him after they lost everything, unable to handle the shame and the poverty. He lived in a mobile home and worked as a welder, taking whatever jobs he could find. Before he left, he gripped my shoulder with a hand calloused from decades of hard work. Your mother had more courage than anyone I ever met. You honor her by finishing this. After he drove away, Ryan turned to me. That's 3 witnesses now. Walker, plus the 2 on your mom's list. Wright can build a case around that. If they all testify. They will. People are tired of being afraid. A month into our work on the house, Kenneth Moore called my phone. I'd stopped answering unknown numbers after the first few threatening calls, but this one came from a local area code I recognized. Brandon Clark, who's asking Kenneth Moore, Pinewood Ventures, we need to talk. I don't think we do. His voice was smooth, practiced. I understand you've been speaking with federal investigators. That's your right, of course. But I want to make sure you understand the situation you're in. I understand it fine. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're a kid with no resources, taking on people who have been in business for 30 years. You're playing a game you don't understand with stakes you can't afford. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. Moore's tone shifted, became almost friendly. Look, Brandon, we all know what this is really about. You're angry. Your mother died and you need someone to blame. But mistakes happen. Accidents happen. Fighting us won't bring her back. It'll just make your own life harder. My mother's death wasn't an accident, and I'm not fighting you. I'm just telling the truth about what you are. Careful, kid. Truth is expensive. You sure you can afford it? I hung up. Ryan, who'd been listening, shook his head. He's trying to sound reasonable while threatening you. Classic abuser tactic. Let him try. Agent Wright said to stay visible and keep living. That's what I'm doing. But Moore's call rattled me more than I wanted to admit. He was right that I was outmatched in terms of money and connections. All I had was documentation and determination. Sometimes that's enough, sometimes it isn't. That night, unable to sleep, I read more of my mother's letters, found one dated just 2 months before her death. Brandon, I met with a lawyer today. Not Rebecca Anderson, a different one. A criminal defense attorney in Boise who specializes in organized crime. I told her everything, showed her my evidence. She said it's strong enough to bring RICO charges if the FBI gets involved. She also said, I'm in danger. That king will know I'm compiling this information and he'll act to stop me. I'm not afraid of dying, bear cub. I'm only afraid of failing you. If something happens to me before I can finish this, know that I tried. Know that every day without you was agony, but every day I survived was a day closer to making you safe. She'd known. She'd known the danger and gone forward anyway. And they'd killed her for it, made it look like an accident, counted on the corruption of a small-town coroner to close the case. 2 months later, Agent Wright called with news. We've executed search warrants on King's businesses, seized computers, files, financial records. Kenneth Moore is cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's giving us everything. Moore flipped like a pancake. Turns out loyalty only goes so far when you're facing 20 years in federal prison. He's detailing the entire operation. How King identified targets, how they manipulated loan terms, how they forced sales through intimidation. It's all on record now. What about King himself? We arrested him this morning. Wright's voice held satisfaction. Charged with racketeering, extortion, wire fraud conspiracy to commit fraud. He's being arraigned tomorrow. Bail hearing is set for Friday. Will they grant bail? Probably. He's not a flight risk. No violent priors on record. But he'll have conditions. No contact with witnesses, surrender of passport, electronic monitoring. And Brandon. Once he's out, he's going to be angry. Be careful. Agent Wright's warning proved prescient. King made bail Friday afternoon, $500,000 posted by his attorney. He was released with a GPS ankle monitor and a long list of people he couldn't contact. I wasn't on that list because I wasn't technically a witness. I was the son of someone who'd gathered evidence, a distinction that mattered legally but meant nothing practically. Sunday afternoon, 3 days after his release, Donald King drove up to my house in his black Cadillac. Ryan and I were on the porch taking a break from installing new windows. We both stood as the car approached, moving to the steps. King parked and got out slowly, deliberately. He was 60, maybe 62, with silver hair combed straight back. He wore a gray suit, despite the weekend expensive shoes that picked up dust from the dirt road. His face was tanned and unlined, the face of someone who'd never done physical labor, never worried about money. He stood by his car, hands in his pockets, looking at the house. When his eyes moved to me, they were cold and assessing. You must be Brandon. His voice was smooth, cultured. You look like your father. Michael wasn't it. Good man. Terrible with money, but good-hearted. My chest tightened, muscles tensing. Don't talk about my father. Fair enough. King took a few steps closer, stopped at the base of the porch steps. He looked around at the work we'd done, the fresh paint, the new windows. You've fixed the place up. Looks better than it has in years. What do you want to talk? Man to man without lawyers and federal agents. He gestured at the house. Your mother lived here for 12 years, alone, working minimum wage jobs, hoarding evidence like it was gold. She died on a dark road because she couldn't let the past go. Is that what you want? To end up alone, obsessed with revenge, throwing your life away? My mother died because someone cut her brake lines. Everyone knows it. The only question is, who gave the order? King's expression didn't change. Brake lines fail. Cars break down. Accidents happen every day, Brandon. You can't build a conspiracy theory around bad luck and poor vehicle maintenance. The FBI disagrees. The FBI is pursuing a case based on circumstantial evidence and the testimony of disgruntled former associates. Moore is lying to save himself. Walker is bitter about bad business decisions. Your mother was mentally unstable, living in isolation, seeing patterns that didn't exist. He said it all calmly, like reciting facts. None of it will hold up in court. Then you have nothing to worry about. I have nothing to worry about legally. King's tone sharpened. But I do worry about you, Brandon. You're 18 years old with no family, no support system, living in a house that should have been torn down years ago. You rejected a generous offer that would have given you a real future. Instead, you're playing detective, letting federal agents use you as a pawn in their career-building exercise. I'm finishing what my mother started. Your mother started nothing but a delusion. King stepped closer, his polished shoes on the bottom porch step. She convinced herself I was some kind of criminal mastermind, when all I ever did was run legitimate businesses. Did some people make bad investments? Yes. Did some loans go bad? Of course. That's the nature of lending. But I never forced anyone to do anything. Every signature on every document was voluntary. Robert Walker's daughter was 12 when you threatened to make her disappear. That's not business. That's terrorism. Walker is lying. King's voice went flat, dangerous. And you're repeating slander. Be very careful, Brandon. The law protects people from false accusations. I could sue you for defamation. Go ahead. Put it on the record. Let's see what a jury thinks. We stared at each other across the space, two people on opposite sides of a truth too big to ignore. Finally, King spoke again, his voice dropping lower. The trial will take years. I have the best lawyers money can buy. You have nothing but a dead woman's conspiracy theories and your own stubbornness. Even if by some miracle they convict me, I'll appeal. I'll drag this out until you're 30 years old, still living in this wreck, still fighting a battle everyone else has forgotten. My mother fought for 12 years. I can wait. She died alone in the dark. King's words were precise, calculated to wound. She spent the last decade of her life in this hovel, writing letters to a son she abandoned, convincing herself she was some kind of hero. Is that what you want? To die alone clinging to a crusade no one cares about? She wasn't alone at the end. She had the truth, and the truth doesn't die just because the person carrying it does. King studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, almost respectfully. You really believe that? He walked back to his car, opened the door, paused. I'll see you in court. Brandon, I hope you're ready for what that means. He drove away, leaving dust hanging in the air. Ryan exhaled slowly. That was him trying to intimidate you into backing down. I know. It didn't work. No, because what King didn't understand, what people like him never understand, is that some fights aren't about winning or losing. They're about refusing to surrender. The months that followed were a blur of depositions, document review sessions, and preparation meetings with federal prosecutors. Agent Wright's task force expanded to include IRS investigators, state attorneys, general and banking regulators. King's empire was dissected piece by piece, every transaction scrutinized, every shell company traced. The house became my anchor. Ryan and I worked on it between meetings, turning it from a ruin into something approaching home. George taught me woodworking, and I discovered I had a knack for it. measuring, cutting, fitting pieces together until they formed something whole and functional, satisfied me in a way nothing else ever had. I built a small workshop in the old shed behind the house, cleaned it out, installed a workbench and tools George helped me source from estate sales, started making simple things, cutting boards, small shelves, picture frames. Laura bought 3 cutting boards for her kitchen and told her friends, and suddenly I had orders. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A skill, a purpose, something I could build with my hands. Ryan found work as an electrician's assistant with a contractor in Burns, driving back and forth each day. In the evenings, we'd sit on the porch and talk about the life we were building, the one neither of us had imagined possible 6 months earlier. 8 months after King's arrest, the trial began. The federal courthouse in Boise was imposing all marble and security checkpoints. I sat in the gallery every day, watching prosecutors present my mother's evidence piece by piece. The ledger was entered as Exhibit 47, the photographs as Exhibits 50 through 73. The cassette recordings were played for the jury. My mother's voice filling the courtroom as she detailed King's threats and schemes. Robert Walker testified for 3 hours, describing in painful detail how King had destroyed his family. 2 other witnesses' names from my mother's list corroborated the pattern of threats and coercion. Kenneth Moore testified for the prosecution, laying out the mechanics of the fraud with the precision of someone trying to save himself. He detailed meetings where King laughed about families losing their homes, where they discussed tactics for intimidating witnesses, where they celebrated acquisitions of property worth millions purchased for pennies on the dollar. King's lawyers were good. They attacked every witness's credibility, suggested financial motives, painted their client as a legitimate businessman targeted by vengeful former associates. They portrayed my mother as a paranoid recluse whose evidence was nothing but the delusions of a troubled mind. But the paper trail was undeniable. Bank records, property transfers, loan documents with altered dates. The prosecution had spent months building an airtight case, and it showed. The jury deliberated for 4 days. I spent those days at the house, unable to focus on anything, working in the shop with trembling hands, building nothing coherent, just moving wood around to keep from screaming. When the call came from Agent Wright, I was sanding a piece of pine that would never become anything useful. Guilty on all counts. Her voice held restrained triumph. Racketeering, extortion, wire fraud, conspiracy. The judge will sentence in 6 weeks, but Brandon, he's looking at 20 to 25 years minimum. The news hit me harder than expected. I sat down on the shop floor phone still pressed to my ear and cried. Not from relief, though that was there, but from the weight of it all finally lifting. My mother had been right. The truth had been enough. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many people in your life fought battles you never saw? How many sacrifices were made in silence, mistaken for something else? My mother taught me that love isn't always visible. Sometimes the deepest love is the quietest fight. The sentencing hearing was smaller, more somber. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd presided with stern fairness throughout the trial, read through the charges methodically before pronouncing sentence. Donald King, you have been convicted of operating a criminal enterprise that destroyed lives and families across 3 states. You showed no remorse, no recognition of the harm you caused. This court sentences you to 22 years in federal prison to be followed by 5 years of supervised release. You are further ordered to pay restitution totaling $3.2 million to your victims. King stood motionless as the sentence was read, his expensive suit looking incongruous against the orange jumpsuit he'd soon be wearing. U.S. Marshals led him from the courtroom in handcuffs. Robert Walker gripped my hand outside the courthouse. Justice took a long time, but it came. Because of my mother, because of her, and because you didn't quit. Walker's eyes were wet. My daughter's coming home next month. First time in 12 years she'll set foot in Montana. That's because of you, Brandon. I drove back to Hollow Ridge that night, exhausted, but something approaching peaceful. The house waited lights on in the windows. Ryan had left burning. It looked nothing like the ruin I'd first seen. Fresh paint, new roof, cleared yard. But more than that, it looked lived in, loved. Over the following year, the house transformed completely. With money from King's restitution fund distributed among his victims, I paid off the back taxes and had enough left to make real improvements. New plumbing, updated electrical insulation that made the Montana winters bearable. George retired and offered to sell me his store. I bought it with a loan from a bank that actually followed regulations, paid him in installments over 5 years. The woodworking remained my passion, but the store provided steady income. Ryan opened his own electrical business, operating out of an office he rented in Burns. He still lived at the house most nights, the spare bedroom his whenever he wanted it. We'd become brothers in the way that mattered, choosing each other when blood family had failed us both. Laura Wilson became a kind of surrogate grandmother, showing up every Sunday with food and stories. Helen Wright helped me finish my GED and encouraged me to take online courses in business management. The community that had stitched me into its fabric held me there not out of pity, but because I'd proven I belonged. 1 year after the trial, I drove to Hollow Ridge Memorial Cemetery, 5 miles outside town. My mother's grave was simple. I'd paid for a new headstone with money from my workshop, replacing the temporary marker the county had provided. The granite was gray, polished smooth, with her name carved deep, Rebecca Martin, 1978 to 2024. Beloved Mother. Below that, the words I'd chosen after months of consideration. She never stopped fighting. I knelt in the grass, placing a bouquet of white roses on the earth above where she rested. The mountain wind moved through the cemetery, carrying the scent of pine. I kept my promise, Mom. We won. The words were quiet, meant only for her, but they carried weight, the weight of truth finally spoken, of justice, finally served, of a fight finally finished. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever had to rewrite your understanding of someone, or if you've discovered that love can look like distance, I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments, because every story of silent sacrifice, every battle fought in the shadows, deserves to be heard. You're not alone in this. I stood brushing grass from my knees. The workshop was calling orders, waiting to be filled. George's store needed inventory. Ryan was installing wiring in a new construction project and wanted my help measuring spaces for outlets. Life waited. The kind of life my mother had fought to give me, the one she'd sacrificed everything to make possible. My name is Brandon Clark. I'm Rebecca's son, and I finally understand what home means. It's not a place you're given. It's a place you build, defend, make your own. It's the people who stand beside you when everything falls apart. It's the truth you fight for, even when the whole world says to let it go. My mother built a fortress out of loneliness and love. I built a life on the foundation she left me. That's inheritance. That's legacy. That's what it means to honor someone who gave everything so you could have anything at all. The sun was setting as I drove back toward the house, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson. Smoke rose from the chimney, Ryan already home and starting dinner. Lights glowed warm in windows that had once been boarded shut. I pulled up the drive and parked, taking a moment to just look at what we'd built. What my mother had made possible, what love looks like when it's willing to sacrifice everything, even its own happiness, for the survival of someone else. The door opened, and Ryan stepped out onto the porch, waving me inside. The smell of cooking food drifted out, along with the sound of music from the radio. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door toward warmth and light and the life I'd chosen to build on ground my mother had defended with her last breath, home.